Welcome to the Yorkshire Leaders podcast, where we get inspired by the stories, successes and failures of the local leaders of today, and importantly, we hope to help inspire the leaders of tomorrow. I'm Rachel Clark, a marketing director and lifelong learner who's on a mission to learn from the leaders across our region and to share their stories to help inspire us all to take on new challenges and grow from them. Now, today's Yorkshire leader is an entrepreneur with an impressive career in his industry. I'm pretty sure many of you will have a close and emotional connection to the products he specialises in. He's been busy growing his fourth generation family business, now with a team of about 60 people, for 35 years. So from Hull to Champagne via Bordeaux, please welcome Mr. John Townend. John, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Good morning, Rachel. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, thanks. Welcome to the podcast and thanks for being here.
No problem at all.
So John, I just did a little bit of an intro, but I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about the business that you're in and about House of Townend.
I'm fourth generation. So the business was set up by my great-grandfather back in 1906. My grandfather Charles took it on, then my father, and then I came into the business back in 1988. It's quite a different business today than it was when I came in, but I think that's the case with all multi-generational businesses. They'd have to change because if they don't change, they die. So yeah, we've had a lot of developments over the years. It's been a lot of fun and we've had a lot of difficulties, but it was forever thus, I guess.
That is amazing. So I didn't know it was a fourth generation business until I started researching it. But to start in 1906 and be going in 2023 and thriving is just such an achievement for you and your ancestors. And I'm sure that, like you say, there's been lots of ups and downs along the way. So what does House of Townend do now?
The focus of our business now is very much the supply of wines and spirits to the hotel and restaurant trade, primarily in the north of England, although we do go all over the country. And we trade from two bases, our HQ, which is in Melton, East Yorkshire, and also Lakeland Vintners, which is our business in the lakes, which is actually where I am here today.
Oh, how lovely. It's a great day to be in the lakes as well. It's not
Yeah,
actually
it's
raining today, I'm guessing.
No, it's very sunny. It's lovely.
I mean, I just don't even know where to start. There's so many places we could go with wine and spirits. But I know that you actually spent some time in France a while ago, to learn the craft and to learn the language. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my father, historically, a lot of wine was shipped from France. It still is. And my father, although he did A-level French, he couldn't really understand. He could speak a few words, but as soon as they started speaking, then in later years he'd turn around and say, "What do they say?" He had this view that if I was coming into the business, and as the eldest son, I was coming into the business, that I had to speak French. So from the age of 11, he sent me on French exchanges every summer. And then as soon as I left school, I went and worked in France for a year with various suppliers to learn about wine, but also to learn the language so that I could actually converse with them, which was, it is an important aspect of the business. And after that year, I then came back and went to Warwick Business School for 3 years before coming into the business.
That's fantastic. And I mean, having done French myself as well at uni, which is now terrible because I know that if you're not practicing, you're losing words every day. But those French exchanges can be slightly traumatic sometimes. You're sent away a million miles away from home. You don't speak any of the language, and it's absolutely a great way to learn. But it's really quite a challenge when especially when you're 11, to go away and do that. So
it was. I was actually very lucky because I got on very well with the French boy and the whole family. There were 3 brothers, and I got on very well with them. So whereas my brother and sisters, they did it for a year or two, didn't really work out and stopped. I went back to the same family for all the way up to the age of 18.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it got a lot easier. Sure, the first few years was it was tough because they didn't speak a word of English.
Yeah, and it's the only way as well.
Yeah.
To kind of immerse yourself. That's great. And so I'm guessing you still speak French with your suppliers. How does that?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not bilingual or anything, but I have to go to France several times a year. Quite a lot of the producers we deal with are very small. They're artisan producers in the likes of Burgundy and the Rhone Valley. They don't speak English. So if you can't converse with them, then it makes it difficult.
Yeah, difficult to trade if you can't converse.
Do you know what I find with when you try and speak someone's language? they not only they're very forgiving, but you actually get, it works. You get more. And if we're putting together one of our house wines and it's not a great year, and you instinctively think, yeah, we need to boost the Merlot content in this wine to get it up to a nice fruity, open, lush sort of wine. It's going to cost more, but you can twist their arms, and they're much more giving if you make an effort.
And winemaking, I mean, in France, it's such a emotive part of their heritage, and the people that are making the wine are so passionate about it.
Well, it's a labor of love. I mean, the making of wine, it's all year round. If you've spent the cold months of January, February pruning in the vineyard with your fingers literally freezing, you realize it's an agricultural product of wine. It's a tough life, and a lot goes into it.
And so much knowledge as well. Like you say, your family business has been going for 4 generations. I'm sure some of those wine, makers have been going for equally as long, if not longer.
We deal with
growing.
winemakers and suppliers who my father dealt with in his youth, in his early years in the business. So I'm dealing with winemakers now who my father dealt with his father. It does carry on. Yeah, it's a great industry.
Obviously, we mentioned, from Hull to Champagne. I was quite pleased with that little intro. But so
That
you're
was fun.
based.
Champagne was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. So you've got offices in Hull, and then also you mentioned that you're in the Lakes today, and then you're supplying wine all over the north to hotels and restaurants and.
Yes, hotels, restaurants, caterers, pub restaurants. As I say, mostly in the north of England, but we do go all over the UK. And then I would say that accounts for about 80% of our business. And then 10% of our business is what we would call agency. We're supplying wines that we ship into the UK to smaller wine merchants. And then the other 10% is our website, which is houseoftownend.com, that's grown very well over the last few years, helps during the COVID years, of course. And also our cellar door, which we have at our HQ in Melton.
Yeah,
that's how the business is made up.
Fantastic. I've heard about the Melton place. So that's just off the A63 on the way to Hull, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And apparently, for our listeners, if you're going that way, but apparently it's just the most incredible facility, and you've got.
Well,
so
we
much
bring
wine over there.
all our stock is shipped to our bonded warehouse. It is a bonded warehouse. So
yeah, just explain what that is to me, because I'm clueless.
When we say a bonded warehouse, when wines are shipped into the UK, they are shipped under bond, so they're shipped duty free, and then before they can be sold to the consumer or to a restaurant, we need to pay the excise duty, and that's a big percentage of certainly an everyday wine. And only was it last week the duty was increased by the government by between 20 and 40%. So
Wow.
big increase in alcohol tax last week.
That's
so
huge.
having our own bonded warehouse is really, really important from a cash flow point of view. What it means is that all the wines that we ship into the UK, they come to us straight away. They don't go to a third party bonded warehouse. So we always have everything on site. So the availability that we have in the cellar door is fantastic, because if it's not in the shop, it's in the warehouse, and we can quickly pay the duty, and it's available.
And I'm sure lots of people listening to this, because there will be lots of very keen wine drinkers, will be thinking, great, can people just turn up and
it's open to the public.
purchase there.
Yeah, it's a busy little place, so come down.
Excellent.
We've always got some wines on tasting. So it's good.
Obviously, you talked about being the eldest son, so it was like you were going to go into the business, and you were going to speak French and become obviously a wine expert. So how did you, with the tasting of wine, and how does that kind of all get taught? Is it just experience? Do you have to do, some
Well, yes, it is. I think we were saying earlier, repetition, practice. They're the mother and father of skill, aren't they?
I'll just talk a little bit about that, because we weren't recording them, but for our listeners, the reason John and I know each other is actually because we were in a band together. And I was asking John if he still plays guitar, and we were talking about the need for repetition and practice and all the good stuff. So obviously that's the same with wine.
Well, it is, but there is also the theory that you need to learn. There is so much to learn about wine, all the wine producing countries throughout the world. So there is a program of examinations. The Wine and Spirits Education Trust which goes all the way up to Master of Wine. And so you can go through the process of all those examinations, learning along the way. But there's nothing better than practical experience. And when you get to my age, if you're not reasonably good at what you do, then you should have got another job.
That's
as
true.
I say,
After 35 years doing it.
yeah.
So I don't know if I've told you this before, but when I started out in PR and marketing in London, I was working for a big agency, and Remy Martin Cognac was one of their clients, and that was one of my clients, my first ever clients. A total lightweight anyway, but I'm not a fan of cognac. Obviously, I'm a Luddite, but it was a fascinating exploration of tasting, food matching.
Yeah. That's a fascinating. The drinks industry is a fascinating industry.
It really
It
is.
really is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's everything from geography to weather to passion of the producers to
and the viticultural developments that have had to take place over the last sort of 20 years, 20, 30 years, with the changing climate.
Absolutely.
That all has to be taken into account.
And what sort of things are changing, John, with that? What are people saying? Obviously we've got some English producers now that are churning out quite good wine.
Yeah, I think in another 40, 50 years' time, English producers, they're producing some great stuff already, particularly sparkling wine. The sparkling wine that's produced in the south of England, there's some fantastic sparkling wine produced. But it's difficult. What they're finding is that winter temperatures tend to be warmer, and so the vines are coming alive much earlier. One of the big problems that they've had in recent years, particularly in places like Burgundy, where the vines have woken up, and then all of a sudden there's a spring frost.
Oh my goodness!
And that has caused havoc, and that is difficult. And also the heat in the summer can be a big problem. But canopy management of the vine, the whole way vineyards are managed now compared to 30 years has changed and has had to, but quality has never been better.
And I guess it's the same with any industry as well. Things change, don't they? Even with agriculture itself, it's changed massively. We've got
well, if you don't
AI
change
and GPS.
Yeah, if you don't change, you get left behind, or you die, don't you? It's
business.
You have to, you're continually changing.
And John, what kind of leader would you say that you are? Obviously, you've got a big team doing lots of incredible work. What would they say about you?
I hate to think. I'm not somebody. I always think that if people put their feet on the floor in the morning and they're looking forward to work and they enjoy their work, that's a good situation. So I think creating an environment where people enjoy what they do, they will perform well. Fear is not doesn't do anybody any good.
That's so true.
People are their own biggest critics. Good people, they are their own biggest critics. You don't need to say a lot. I'm not a hard taskmaster and what have you. Am I collaborative? Yeah. As I say, create the right environment and good people will perform.
And also having worked in, some places where there is a big fear culture, like you say, it's just counterintuitive.
Yeah, I think the benefit that we have, we are a small business. We have a very flat structure. Everybody knows each other. My finance director once said, great thing about here is there's no politics. He'd experienced working in much bigger companies, and there is politics there, and that can be quite damaging. There's no hiding places, and that's so quite important as well, because if there are places for people to hide, that creates a bit of tension as well.
I think certainly now with technology and we've got so much communication, haven't we? Everything just happens a lot faster. I always think things can go wrong and you can deal with it faster than.
I'm probably a bit old-fashioned in that I'm not very pro working from home.
Right. Well, I've heard this before.
So that's one thing that I've not entertained. Well, I entertained it once and I was proved right. No, people are better working together.
I think certainly with the products and the fact that you're so customer facing as well. You're learning, I think when you're in an office, you're learning and collaborating you're learning from what other people are up to. You're learning from what's going on. You can have a chat. It is
Zoom has its place, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Today, exactly. It really does. But in terms of the general running of the business, we don't have a situation where people can work 2 days from home. No, we want everybody together in the office.
I did see a meme the other day that Zoom, the platform that's encouraged everyone to work from home, has got a huge office and it wants everyone back in the office.
Yeah, I saw that.
so there we go.
There's some very successful people I do admire. A lot of people I know who've run their own family businesses and done very well. What they go through. So yeah, I admire them. But any one particular leader, no, because if there's a successful leader, he's got a great team around him.
He or she.
Sorry,
definitely.
Yeah, he or she.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's something I'm learning more of through the podcast, is the people I'm interviewing often say, you're not going anywhere without a great team. And that's the key.
It's not rocket science. It really isn't rocket science. You and that's the thing with a family business. I can't remember who it was that said to me when I was very young. They said, I wish I knew who it was, but they said, John, just remember, you're there, let's be honest, because you were born into the business. So always make sure you have really good people around you. You're there and you're there for life. So make sure you get really good people around you. And it was really good advice. You suddenly realize there's quite a responsibility coming into a family business. You can't do it yourself.
We talked earlier about practice and repetition and having to fail before you get growth, if you like. And obviously you went through those experiences of being with a French family and obviously having no clue at the start when you were 11 and then growing so that you could understand and going through that process. But I was just kind of wondering if you could think of any failures that have actually created a success in the business, where something's gone wrong and it's made you change something.
Failures, I guess we've all had them, haven't we? My biggest failure was I came into the business and the business was very much off licenses, wine shops. And it was at a time that supermarkets were taking that trade. So the off-license sector was really struggling. In fact, the likes of names like Threshers, Victoria Wine, Unwin's, Cellar 5, they all went bust. Odd bins, all went bust. I realized that we had to change our business and change it very quickly because it was dying. It was losing money. It was a difficult time. My father was in Parliament, so he wasn't in the business.
Wow.
We'd had a court case, which I could do a podcast on that probably.
Oh my goodness.
with the production of Avocar back in the 70s.
Wow.
The court case went all the way to the House of Lords and we lost. So the business was in a difficult position. It was fortunate that it had a good capital base and we knew what we were doing in terms of wine importing, but we had to change the business. And it was at a time when people were starting to eat out more. The restaurant sector was growing. So that was an obvious move. So we had the right products and we gradually started growing that business. And it was doing well, but it wasn't sufficient to carry the business on its own. But then we were left with 12, 15 off licenses, which were losing money. I should have closed them and sold them sooner. And I didn't. I did everything I could to try and make them work, but failed. And eventually we started to sell them one by one. We sold a block. And as soon as we sold the final block of shops, the remaining business was in a really good position. And I just wished I'd done it sooner. But it was the business that I'd taken over. And I just felt I had to keep trying. Where Absolutely. Actually the best thing to have done would have been to say, no, let's cut our losses and move on.
That's a hard thing to do sometimes, isn't it? When you've got a legacy, especially with a family business as well, it's very emotive. People have taken decisions based on the market at that time. And
I remember 2005, there was the shop which my great-grandfather bought when he started the business down Beverley Road, and he was losing a lot of money. And I said to my father, I said, look, I'm afraid I'm going to have to close it. And I was waiting for him to say, really? Do you have to? And he just said, well, your great-grandfather wouldn't be very happy with you if the reason that you kept it open was that the next year, 2006, was our centenary, so we closed it.
That was almost like a freedom piece of advice from your father, wasn't it?
Kind of, yeah, I think it was.
Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
Do what you need to do.
At the end of the day, it's not about the past, it's about the future of the business.
And you just mentioned your father was in Parliament. Was he, I don't know the backstory.
Yeah, he was a member of Parliament 1979 to 2001. Yeah, he was definitely a man of opinions, of beliefs, which nowadays I wish more of them had. The court case that I mentioned earlier, that happened in 78, 79. Finally, we lost in the Lords, I think in 1982. And He was really upset about it because it was a bit of a knife edge case, and as I say, I could tell you so many things about that that you find
That's an
out later.
experience to go
Yeah,
through as a family, even just.
it was because
Yeah.
we at the time he was personally liable, so we could have lost the business. He fell out of love with the business. He was bitterly disappointed, and also he had his career in London. So the business sort of stumbled on for the next few years,
But
and he
luckily,
stayed there till 2001.
and luckily you were there to take it on as well.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, he did, because I didn't want to come back to the business to start with. I wanted to go to London, as any young person would, and get some experience, which I should have done.
Do you
But he
think?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. But he said, "Look, you either come back now, or I'm going to sell the business." And
Wow.
he was, I think he was serious.
Yeah,
He
I'm
said,
sure.
the business isn't in a great state. You're going to have to come back, learn the business to carry it on.
I mean, what an amazing opportunity, though. Obviously, you always think, oh, I should have done that. But actually, looking at it from an outsider's point of view, it's a great opportunity to do it. And then actually, there's no place like learning, especially when it was not going so well.
The thing is, whatever happens to you that you didn't want to happen, you try and correct that with your own kids. I remember my father-in-law once saying to me, he said, "The thing is, John," he said, "you always remember the things that your parents did badly. You tend to forget things that they did well. So the things that they did badly, you do well, and the things that they did well, you do badly." I thought, yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
my daughter wanted to. She spent time in France and Spain, in fact, and then she went to university, and she wanted to come back to the business. And I went the other way. I said, no, go and get some experience elsewhere. So she did go to London, and she's been there for the last 4 or 5 years in the wine trade, and she's building her own career.
If you could, well, talking around that, if you could give your 21-year-old self some advice, what would you say to him?
What advice would I give anybody?
Well, exactly. I was thinking, what advice would you give
Business
yourself?
advice, career advice. Try and enjoy yourself. I mean, TikTok, it really does go quickly, doesn't it? I don't feel any different when I was 25, but I know I am. So I would say enjoy yourself. But at the same time, I would say have a plan. What do you really want to do? And it's what you want to do, which is important, because if you do something you want to do, you'll do it well, and you'll end up doing it for a long time, and you'll hopefully end up doing it very, very well. So find something that you enjoy and have a plan. Don't waste time.
Great advice. What sort of, well, this is an interesting one. What healthy or unhealthy habits do you have?
Okay,
That could be physical, mental, whatever.
I'll start off with a healthy habit. I have a glass of wine with my meal every night. And we've got to remember, alcohol is a drug. We should never forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, if you use it responsibly, it's a fantastic part of life. But the interesting one is in southwest France. They call it the French paradox, because I think the average age of death for a man is something like 90 in southwest France. It's the highest in France. And there was a big question, how can this be? Because they eat so much fat, a lot of duck
cheese,
and what have you.
Cheese, duck, sausage.
But research was done into the local wine, Madiran, and they found that actually the Tanat grape, the grape that's used in the production of Madiran, actually has components which are actually positively good for your health. And it's about a balanced diet. They eat a very balanced diet down there, and that's proof that they're very healthy people.
Yeah, I've read about the French paradox several times, and it's kind of that being active into old age as well, isn't it? And
absolutely, yeah.
a community as well.
Absolutely, it's all part of it. It's balance, isn't it? It's balance.
Yeah.
It's equilibrium.
Yeah.
So important.
I mean, I must ask: have you got this is a tricky one for someone that's doing what you do, but have you got a favourite region or a favourite place that you go and visit?
No, I think I would say when it comes to wine, be promiscuous. There's so many fantastic wine producing regions around the world. I mean, there's so many different wines which match the local cuisine. I enjoy going to all of them, really.
Wow.
Difficult.
No, it's an impossible question.
It's an impossible one to answer, because I don't drink the same thing every night. I'll drink some. I always like to drink something different. So no, I don't have any favorites at all.
Yeah,
it's a bit like
naming your favorite child.
Exactly. If you're with a winemaker, the worst thing to do is to ask him which one. If he produces 7 or 8 different wines from different small vineyards, and you say to him, which one do you prefer? He or she will look at you as if to say, you're asking me to choose from my kids. Come on.
We sort of talked a bit about how you like to lead in the business and having a great team. Are there any sort of values that have been passed down through the generations, would you say, that you like to make sure you're living or make sure you're leading with?
I think be honest with people. If you're honest with people, people will, they love to be praised. But, if something hasn't worked out or someone has done something which, could have done it better, just if you're honest with them, then they will take it on board. But treat them all with respect. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they're picking orders in the warehouse, delivering them, selling the wine, working in the administrative part of the business. They're all part of a team.
And they all need each other as well. It's like you can't do one without the next, without
no,
the
you
next.
can't. You can't, and you've got to get on and work together. And if you have it's like sport. I mean, you like a lot of people. I love sport. I love it when teams that are not necessarily, they shouldn't necessarily win. They're playing a team which is better, and they win, and you think, yeah, and they've done it through teamwork. Okay, so individually they may not have been as skillful as their opponents, but as a team they perform better. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. As a fellow sport lover as well. And sometimes you can't quite put your finger on what the magic is, but for some reason the team is working together.
Yeah, it's often stability is a good thing. I mean, I always find it incredible in football, the way they change the managers all the time, and they don't stand a chance, do they? It's just
Look at Alex Ferguson. It took him years, didn't it?
Well, exactly. And you can pick out a number of examples where the manager's been with a team for a long period of time, and he creates a culture that people buy into, are comfortable with, and they know exactly what everybody else is doing and thinking. And you know what? They end up being successful. And you think, why don't more teams do it? Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast, is the parallels between sport and business.
Yeah, I read a very good book called The Edge,
and
it was about how you...
Not the U2 frontman.
No, it was, or was it called Edge? It was just called Edge, and it was how you can transmit training practices and philosophies in football into business. And it was really interesting. So I think how you manage a team in sport is probably not that different to how you manage a team in business, because you have a lot of different characters, but
they're capable of brilliant things. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but I used to work at Red Bull in London.
Yeah.
Doing marketing, and it was a time when they were doing a lot of work with extreme sports, snowboarders, all the crazy things that you see on the content that Red Bull gets involved with. But they were also doing a lot with cricket, and Freddie Flintoff was one of their ambassadors. So it was great. So I used to see, random sports stars all the time in the office, which was brilliant. But they also got their sports psychologists involved in the business. So they would come in to, educate us and train us on what was going on in the sports teams. And I just used to find it fascinating. I'd be all ears to all of that because I think it's so relevant.
It is. I think a lot of teams have found out, haven't they, that they've, over many, many years, decades, they've trained their players physically. But it's probably only in the last sort of 10, 15 years that they've realised that actually you have to train them mentally.
That's almost the most important, isn't it?
Well, it is, because is it 10,000 hours? Is the argument 10,000 hours of practice and you'll never get any better? So therefore, what's the difference? And the difference really is mental.
Yeah, that's small margin.
No, I was just going to say small margin. I was watching the Wimbledon final.
Yes.
And I think after 4 sets, was it 4 sets? They put the number of points scored by each player on the screen, and they won exactly the same amount of points.
Just unbelievable. And both, for people that aren't massive tennis fans, both the players are incredibly mentally tough.
Oh, incredible.
Unbelievable. There's huge lessons.
It's the difference between success and failure at that level is minute.
Yeah, but it was a very good final, wasn't it?
Inspiring. It was amazing. Yeah, it was
inspiring match. So if you had just one message to leave listeners with, what would you leave them with? If you had a billboard and you could put something on it, what would it say?
It's not a dress rehearsal. Just don't waste time. You're not here for long, so don't waste time.
Would you say that people waste time worrying, or?
Well, my wife would say you'll want to talk.
And I always find we're good at our own advice.
Yeah.
This is what we'd like to tell ourselves and everyone else.
Everybody worries, and actually it's what does drive you. And I said earlier, people don't, fear doesn't work when you're managing people. People have enough of their own fears, and they spend their lives dealing with them. So try and enjoy yourself. Always have a plan, every day. What's the objective for today? I often say that, okay, right, what's the objective today? And at the end of the day, you look back, and if you've achieved your objective, then it's a good day. And in business, every time you have a meeting, okay, what's the objective? Are we just going to sit here and waste
Amen to that.
Well,
I've sat
it's
in
true,
too
isn't it?
many meetings where there isn't an objective, or,
Mm.
and I like to say, I think it's Oprah Winfrey says every meeting that she goes to, it's what's the intention for this meeting? What do we want to
Yeah,
do here today?
it's
And I'm just like, it's so simple, but it's important.
well, because then you're likely to achieve something, aren't you?
Yeah. So where can we find out more? I know you mentioned the Melton shop, but if we wanted to go online,
Yeah. Houseoftownend.com is our website, which was so important to us during lockdown. Because when we
absolutely.
locked down, at the time, I think 90% of our business was supplying restaurants and hotels.
Yeah.
So our client base was closed down by government decree. So the only way we could survive really was by pushing our sales to private customers through our website.
And I'm sure some very happy private customers were involved in that because
yeah,
everyone was
and
turning to wine.
yeah, and it saved us. It really did save us. So it was amazing to see the business change literally overnight. And funnily enough, both me and my wife had COVID at the time, and we had it
As
really
well.
badly. So we were actually off work, and our team literally had to change from supplying restaurants, hotels, to packing individual boxes of what mixed cases for the private customers and getting them out. It was, I don't want to go through it again, but it was an interesting time. But it was good for our website, and that's carried on.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your time today. I
Not
think
at all.
it's been a great show, and I will look forward to getting it out there and looking forward to seeing what people's reactions will be, which I'm sure will be highly positive because there's many wine lovers out there. So thanks so much.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.